I'm going to spend a little time this evening and send this video out to help us in our Wednesday night Bible study. With this video, kind of point out a few of the details which we can discuss a little bit in Bible class as we continue on. This is Genesis chapter 10 and Genesis chapter 11. In Genesis chapter 10, we have the table of the nations. It covers more than the time period between Genesis 9 and 11. It's an overview of really how humanity spread, even though in chapter 11 we find out about the Tower of Babel and the reason they spread. As you go through chapter 10, just kind of go through and read, and note as you read so many of the familiar cities and the peoples, and you'll even see some of the nations that are later mentioned in the land of Canaan, which are there when Abraham and Lot and his families go there, and the nations that grew up there that God said they would become wicked, and that's how he was going to give that land to Israel, when the wickedness was full. So go through that particular text, and then the end of chapter 10, it says, "These are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, and their lands, and after their nations." These are the latter part of the table of nations he's speaking about. Verse 32, "These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations. And of these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood." So again, these references go beyond really the time period of the Tower of Babel. And in chapter 11, there is that point in which the Lord tells us about the Tower of Babel and what was going on. So in chapter 11, it says, "And the whole earth was of one language and one speech. It came to pass as they journeyed east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. They said to one another, 'Come, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly.' And they made brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. They said, 'Come, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth.'" That was their purpose. Now, God had told them to replenish, or to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. They apparently were not doing what God said. They were not filling the earth. They were wanting to stay in one place and make a name for themselves. So in verse 5, Jehovah came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And Jehovah said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. And now nothing will be withholden from them which they purpose to do. Come, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So Jehovah scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. This was what God intended, is for the earth to be filled with humanity, for the populations to be spread. But again, we see that man was not doing what God intended. The command that God gave to Noah and to his sons and their families to multiply and fill the earth was not being done. So God had to intervene. And the way he intervened was to confuse their languages. They could not understand one another. Obviously, there were some who would understand some others, but they were not of one language anymore. So they quit building the city, and they were spread throughout the earth, and they began populating that area of the earth. And again, going back to Genesis 10, we see those nations. Another example, when humanity did not follow the will of God and God had to intervene. It's interesting, of course, that the place is called Babel, because Jehovah there did confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did Jehovah drive them abroad upon the face of all the earth. That is verse 9. And then beginning with verse 10, the generations of Shem. And in the generations of Shem, of course, as we go through that chapter, you can chart that chapter by the ages. But then we get down to verse 31. Actually, I'm going to back up to verse 29. It says, "And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarah, or Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah. and the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. And Sarah was barren. She had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, and his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and there they came to Haran and dwelt there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. If you look at Acts, the 7th chapter, you will see that God called Abram from Ur of the Chaldees. And obviously here Terah went with him. That was God's first call, as recorded by Stephen, written by Luke in Acts, the 7th chapter. So they end up in Haran. Haran is in the northwest part of the Mesopotamian Valley, a fertile area, a good area from what we understand geographically. And there Abram was for a period of time. So Genesis 12 begins the life account of Abraham. So consider these particular points. I've just hit a couple of highlights. We'll discuss it Wednesday night a little bit further, finishing chapter 9, looking at 10 and 11, and probably, Lord willing, time permitting, beginning chapter 12.